From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com.
Allen Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Microcasting for your city. Talkopolis.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Our final segment here on Pit Pass today with Russ Thompson, statistician, historian, and, comfort to everybody in the booth.
He'll come over to your house and change your oil if you want him to.
Either that or send his son Ben. Ben's almost 16 now. He'll, odd jobs, you'll hire him out, right?
Sure.
Larry Woody, Joe Williams, as we wrap up here. We talked earlier, and Russ, we talked about being a wealth, and Larry, I don't know about you, never dreamed that A.J. Foyt's first ride at Daytona, at Indianapolis, would have come out of Nashville, much less East Nashville.
We've already learned something hanging around Russ this morning.
Talk about coming full circle, though. The Nashville connections between NASCAR, Indy, and Nashville still remain. Scott Borchetta, Big Machine Records, sponsored the race last year, or was a presenter, I guess is the correct way to put it. Presenting sponsor. Was the sponsor, one of the sponsors on Dan Weldon's car that won the 511.
Right. And a close friend of Weldon's, too, not just a professional relationship. Yeah. Borchetta and Weldon had a close personal relationship.
Well, Borchetta's a racer.
Right.
Yeah, in addition to being an absolute
genius.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the word. I mean, there's no other word for it. Yeah. But he's also a racer. Russ, how do we keep coming up with these? Is it just because it's so close?
That's a lot of it, and I meant to mention that a while ago, and Larry's talking about the success of Indy cars at the super speedway here. I mean, we're only 4 hours from Indianapolis, which is the hub. Yeah. I mean, that's where the big fan base is, and it's nothing for those people, to jump on I-65 now and come down here for that race. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason for its success. Nashville's just a racing town. I mean, we get the numbers for the IndyCar telecast, and Nashville, believe it or not, is always in the top 5, if not the second or third highest rated market for an IndyCar telecast on any given weekend, even if there's a big NASCAR race on. It's just, I'm surprised just talking to people all the time about how many people from Nashville go to the Indy 500.
And Russ, that was one of the things that was so disappointing about our continued struggles here. It's not for a lack of racing fans, because there are jillions of them out there. As you read those marketing figures for NASCAR races, Indy races, the Nashville TV market's one of the highest rated in the country, and for several years was the highest rated. Nashville and Charlotte were just kind of neck and neck for TV ratings for NASCAR stuff, and then the IndyCar stuff's up there. But for whatever reason, they just didn't turn out at the fairgrounds in big numbers. Now, my theory was our fans were sophisticated and used to major league events. We're a big league city, and NASCAR and Dover is trying to sell us minor league events, second and third tier, but still that doesn't explain it entirely. I'm still at a loss with all these jillions of fans around here, as you said, why we can't have any. We've got race fans, but no racing.
But I think you're exactly right, and here's some examples to point that out. I mean, you go back to the 80s. When Gary Baker would bring in those Cup guys, he could bring in Bill Elliott for the Ford Dealers 200, and the place would be packed. Yep. You bring in one guy, he brought in Rusty Wallace one week, the place was packed.
Bobby Allison
one week. Yeah, I mean, he brought in Earnhardt a couple of different times. Yep. He drove Formosa's car once, drove Gray Bickley's car once. Yep. Place was packed. Here's my favorite example. Look at the night they opened NASCAR Cafe. Yep. Estimates are that 25,000 people were lining the streets downtown, lining Broadway. They didn't even see a race car. All they did was see race car drivers get out of a limousine and walk down a red carpet. But like you said, they were the top echelon. They were the upper tier race car drivers. And I think Nashville fans have been spoiled.
That's what I think, and it's not just theory. I've got a good friend that lives in Murfreesboro, Don Christopher, who went to NASCAR to Daytona for about 30 years with me. He's never been to the super speedway and lives down the road from it. He says, now if they get a cup race, I'll be the first one in line for a ticket. But he said, I'm just not interested in truck races and nationwide. Now when Danica's there, he's kind of interested, but he still doesn't go out and buy a ticket. But point being, Russ, I think you're right. It's our fans consider themselves major league fans, and they just didn't turn out for the so-called minor league events.
Is he more interested now that Danica was about to be single? Now, Russ, the other connection, I guess, between NASCAR, the Brickyard, and here's the thing, you know, when that was first announced, NASCAR Cup going to Indianapolis, they're going to race on the yard of bricks. Oh my!
Holy ground!
Oh man!
Sacrilegious.
Yeah, it was.
You know, and this, I mean, 80 teams tried to enter the first time to get a stall so they could get in to try to make this race. Kind of falling off a little bit now. Is it because the track's flat, it's not really great racing, or there's still that aura?
Combination of things.
Okay.
The aura has worn off. The Goodyear tire debacle of a few years ago probably was the biggest thing that hurt them.
Which people probably forgot about, but go.
The average speed of the race was 3 miles an hour, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they literally had to throw a mandated caution every 10 laps so the cars could pit, so they weren't blowing tires.
But even before that debacle, the interest had was on a downhill slide.
I mean, the racing there is not great. It's not built for stock cars. It's a flat track. To have a good stock car race, you pretty much got to have high banks.
Yeah.
And
it was living on Indy's reputation for years, and after that wore thin, they frankly didn't have a whole lot left going for them.
Absolutely. And the thing is, and it's evolved that way into the 500. For so many years, Indy didn't have to market their races. They
True.
put a race on the schedule and opened the gates, and the place was filled.
It was the Indy 500, enough said.
Right.
Well, kind of like Bristol.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Same thing. Yep. Open the gates. We're racing at Bristol Cup cars in waiting list for tickets.
For both of them.
Right.
And now, you start seeing advertising for both of them.
Exactly.
And tickets for sale in newspapers and publications. Well, Russ, what is the future of open wheel racing, the old IndyCar series as we used to call it? Is it viable? Is it healthy? Or is it like some other things, maybe some bumps down the road? And part of it starts again with the economy. A lot of the big dollar sponsorships are kind of drying up right now. What do you see as you look down the road?
I hope they've been through the bumpy part. I hope things from here on are going to be positive and move in an upward, fashion. A lot of it's going to depend on who these people are that they put in the key positions. I mean, they just fired the guy that they hired to bring in and turn the deal around, and he did a lot of positive things. Randy Bernard did a lot of good things for the series, but they've got to get somebody in there. They've got to get a good rudder on the ship, and until we see who that is, it's I don't know, it's just guessing.
As an outsider looking in, I thought he caught some unfair criticism at times. I thought people, including drivers and teams, blamed him for some things that maybe wasn't his fault, some problems with tracks and stuff. Now, I guess you could say, well, it's his responsibility to make sure everything's running well, but again, I'm just not sure he's the really fall guy in the whole thing.
Well, but John Bibb took a lot of grief for you too, Larry.
Yeah, they said Bibb, it's your fault for hiring him. I remember how many times did you have to say that. But no, you think
But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You got to have that head guy, which has been a big problem in IndyCar racing. Then they finally got it. I mean, Bill France took a lot of flack for a lot of things that happened in NASCAR that probably weren't his direct fault, but still, he's the guy sitting on top of the pyramid.
He's the boss.
Yeah.
What about Danica Patrick? What was your take on her? You and I have had these conversations. From the media standpoint, she was great because she got a ton of publicity for the league at IndyCars, and now she's getting a ton of publicity for NASCAR. What's your take on Danica?
She's a talented driver. She was very talented in go-karts. I know some people that were very close with her in go-karts, and at the time said she was going to be good. She was good in Indy cars on ovals. Yeah. She's not a very good road course racer, and I honestly don't think she's ever going to turn out to be a very good stock car racer.
Really? Why?
No. I don't know exactly why. I just think, it's so much different.
Same reason Dario Franchitti didn't turn out to be a very good stock
Well,
car. It's just
and that's
not his.
but that's not fair to him. He didn't have the right circumstances, and he didn't have very much time. If he were given the equipment and the time frame that Danica's had, I guarantee you, he'd turn out to be a stock car racer. It's such a different world. I mean, the downforce on the Indy cars and the tires and the grip level, and people don't realize how little of that there is in a NASCAR stock car. I mean, you're running on 9-inch wide tires with 800 horsepower, and that's, I mean, Ben said this to me the other day. He said, people don't understand how hard it is to drive a stock car at the limit. Now, anybody can get out and drive a stock car at 95%, but that last 5% is what puts you in the Jimmy Johnson and the Tony Stewart and the Matt Kenseth level, and that last 5% is way harder than most people understand.
I was impressed by Danica's decision not to try to do the double header this year, Indy 500 and Coke 600 at Charlotte. I always thought that was a gimmick, and it detracted from both efforts and wasn't fair to either team to try to do. It's impossible to do both, run two of the biggest races on the same day. Well, so to her credit, she turned down what would have been, you know, the biggest sports story of the weekend, Danica's doubleheader, just to concentrate her efforts at Charlotte, and I thought that was, again, to her credit. I think it shows her dedication to her NASCAR commitment.
She should have done that 2 years ago instead of trying to split and do both. You know, I think she really diluted her effort in 2010 by trying to do, or 11, I guess it was, trying to do partial IndyCar season, partial NASCAR. Well, no, full IndyCar season, partial NASCAR.
Yeah, you just can't do both.
No.
So, Russ Thompson, you will be a part of the 24 hours of Daytona coverage starting
26,
couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Next week. And through all the IndyCar races. Indy's TV package will be where this year?
5 races on ABC, which will start at Indy, and they've done a really good thing this year. They've basically got, it's kind of like TNT does with NASCAR. They've got the summer races. They're doing Indy. They're doing both Detroit races. They're doing Texas. Texas on ABC for the first time in prime time network. Texas, which is usually the best race of the IndyCar season. And then Iowa, and going back to Pocono for the first time since 1989.
And when you see those stats flash up on your TV screen, we can say, that's Russ Thompson.
But to answer your question, the rest of the season is going to be on NBC Sports Network.
Okay. Yeah, and when you think the guy behind the microphone is just a genius, no, he's not. It's Russ Thompson.
He's just reading what Russ wrote down.
Yeah, you know.
Sometimes.
Like I did for many years.
Exactly. Russ, thank you for coming in. I hope we can talk you into coming back later. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I don't know why you'd want me back, but...
No, she's not committing, Larry. What'd you do to him?
We'll get the inside scoop. We'll get him back.
Larry, hope you have a great week. We'll be back next week.
Did you need to mention some friends of ours at the...
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about breakfast this morning.
Breakfast
this morning over at the Batter's Box, which was delicious. They're now serving breakfast. They're over at 43 Hermitage Avenue. So breakfast, lunch, dinner. Man, I love eggs.
Russ, you know how important sponsors are, don't you?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Absolutely. Right. Folks, we want to thank you for joining us today. We'll be back, hopefully, next week with more. Malcolm West, scheduled to be our special guest. You've heard him on a microphone across the South, and man, can he tell
He's shorter,
some stories.
Much shorter than he sounds on radio.
He's Larry Woody. I'm Joe Williams. We'll see you next time on Pit Pass.